So this is the Getting to Know Sugar BPM webinar. My name is Andrea Ayers. If you haven't heard me in any of the videos that you've watched on Sugar Club or in one of my classes, I am a product trainer, instructional designer for SugarU, which is just the training department inside of SugarCRM. I am coming up on my 15th year anniversary. I've been in training and professional services and in back-end training. And this particular session is about Sugar BPM, which I'm going to plug later. Just be prepared. I also teach an introduction to Sugar BPM class every other month. So I will give you the opportunity to take a look at that at the end of this webinar. So just as a heads up of what we're going to be covering, we're going to go through a brief introduction. So this is, like the title says, getting to know Sugar BPM. So we're going to start with the basics, like what is Sugar BPM? I know that's pretty simple, right? But we're going to start there. We're going to explain what a process is, specifically dealing with Sugar BPM, our version of a business process method. And we're going to identify what you need in order to build that workflow. So before you even sit down in front of your computer, just start putting it into Sugar. What do you need first? What are some things you need to do? And this will speed up the process, believe it or not, of actually putting the actual workflow itself into Sugar. We're going to identify some examples. Some of them you may have seen before. Some of them make total sense for you, and others may be new stuff. So like, oh, I never thought about doing it that way, or I never thought about putting that into this department. That would be wonderful. So sometimes workflows come to you from your coworkers, other employees at your organization, and they have heard that you have this software that's going to be doing or application that's going to be doing workflows or processes, and they have some ideas. So we're going to talk about how to deal with that too. We're going to introduce the 4 modules that compile the Sugar BPM application. Then we're going to go in and talk about, we're going to put these steps that we're going to cover in the first section into play with an actual scenario. So you're going to see from beginning to end, when someone comes to you and says, I have this idea for a workflow, how do you go from beginning to end and actually put it into the system? And then we'll have a wrap up where we talk about best practices, resources, and then some more learning. Now, let me say this about best practices. I'm going to sprinkle best practices throughout the whole session. Okay, it's not going to just be at the end, but I just have a slide at the end that has some best practices in it. But as we go from this next slide forward, they will all have a little bit of best practices as we go through it. And I'll try to point those out to you as we go through the material. And then at the very end, we'll have a Q&A. So I do have my chat open. I don't have Q&A because I don't like to watch both chat and Q&A at the same time because I'm doing this by myself. So if you have any questions as we go along, if it has to do with what I'm talking about right then, I will address it. If it has to do with something else, I'll wait to the end during the Q&A section and then address it at that point. Okay? All right. All right, so what's a process? I know this seems basic, but we're going to cover it. Make sure we're all on the same page, that we know what a process is. So it's activities, events, and or actions that enable some specific goal, whether it's operation or business goal of your organization. And it's a movement of those activities and events. So you're going to have a beginning and an end. And within that beginning and end, you also have some inputs in the middle. Okay. This is just an example of what a simple workflow may look like, right? They don't have to be super complicated. They will have certain restrictions in each one of these colored shapes as we go through. Okay. By this point, if you're in this webinar, you probably already know the benefits of Sugar BPM, but just at a high level, it improves efficiency and accuracy, right? If you say at this point, I want you to trigger a workflow based on these criteria, it will always trigger a workflow based on those criteria, okay? Also frees up some of your employees. Some people think, oh, we're automating all these. I'm not going to have this work to do more. Well, it's not that you won't have work to do. It's that you'll have different work to do, different employees. Helps avoid any human errors. People make mistakes. It happens. I make mistakes all the time. You can ask anyone that knows me. But if they're done manually, and sometimes when you do things over and over and over, sometimes your brain just does it and you don't really think about what you're doing. And the system will do that consistently throughout. It also increases visibility into processes, enables process performance tracking. So this is for those of you that are admins out there, okay? If you're an admin of your instance of sugar that you're using, you can actually see when workflows are triggered, what status they're in, have been completed. Are we waiting on Joe in accounting to do a step? Maybe you need to go talk to Joe and say, hey, Joe, you may need to do your step, whatever that may be. But as an admin, you're going to be able to see, even in a picture format, what has been completed and what has not been completed. Okay. Usually the system is going to be waiting on time to elapse or a person if it doesn't go all the way through the workflow from beginning to end. It also fosters communication among employees, departments, and eliminates bottlenecks. And with that communication, it's standardized. Okay. So you may have 50 people in sales that are all sending out willy-nilly all different types of communications, right? This is going to standardize that and put it on brand for your organization. So therefore, it's going to boost productivity and generating cost savings. Okay, so let's talk specifically about SugarBPM itself. Like, what is it? So besides streamlining your common business processes by managing approvals, that's something that a person, doesn't necessarily a manager, it could be anyone in particular group even, to approve or reject some kind of task, sales processes, call triage, or anything else. SugarBPM, excuse me, is based on a business process management system. Okay, so if you have used a BPM in the past, you're going to be very familiar with a lot of the same terminology. If you were just to Google BPM, oh my goodness, there's so much stuff out there for BPM and specifically for the methodology or the notations of BPM. Do you have to be a BPM expert in order to use SugarBPM? No, right? And we talk about this in class that I teach. You learn all the steps or all the parts of a process that you're going to create in process definition, and you will become familiar with some of that terminology as we go through creating an actual process in SugarBPM. And finally, it is a business automation software. It's going to do what you tell it to do. So sometimes when you're testing and it's not triggering, it's not doing what it's saying, it's usually because either I messed up, I didn't put a step in, or I put the wrong applies to or the wrong criteria in a particular setting. Once I fix that, I go, oh, obviously that's why it's not triggering. I can go back and fix those things. Okay. But it's just software. It's going to do exactly what you tell it to do in the system. Okay, I got a big list here already. I'm not going to read every little thing on it, but I do want to give you a high level of some ideas for processes. Okay? Now, you may only use sugar right now for sales or for customer support or even marketing. If that's true, not all of these may apply to you, but in the future, if you ever broaden that implementation to another team, you may want to keep these in the back of your head. So for example, the customer support team or service team can use SugarBPM to assign cases, follow up with qualified leads. And sometimes that's the sales team, sometimes that's the marketing, depends on the organization. Most of the time it's sales, but I have worked with organizations that marketing did that kind of action, but this can be done for them in the system. Scheduling demos or consultations, quote creations or even quote discount approvals, contract approvals, which could include beyond sales, finance, legal, maybe even accounts in your organization. New customer onboarding. So this is after you have closed the deal. What happens next? Do you have an implementation team or a professional services team that takes over after that? Or does it go to customer support and they do the onboarding? It just depends on your organization like before. Renewals, that could be sales or other organization pieces of your organization. Fulfilling orders, inviting customers to give a review of what they purchased. Marketing, just opting out. A simple one is that. We actually have one out of the box that you get for that one in the system. And then there is two for HR. You could do one for onboarding new hires or interviewing candidates process. So anything from storing their resumes to actually the notes that someone has put into the system when they interviewed that particular candidate. Okay. So lots of different things you can use process for, and there's hundreds of more examples besides these. Okay. All right. So let's talk about the 4 modules. Okay. So the very central one, the one that's going to hold your actual process from beginning to end is called process definition. Okay. This is where you have the trigger of your workflow, all the inputs and outputs, and how it's going to end. Yes, it can have more than one start, and yes, it can have more than one end. Okay. Depending on particular circumstance. If when you go through these steps that we're going to talk about in a few seconds, you will know ahead of time before you even put your fingers on the keyboard to enter a process definition record, you already know what the picture of your workflow is going to look like, okay? Because you're going to have drawn that out and verified that with the person that's requesting that workflow. So you know ahead of time whether you're going to be using a business rule or an email template. And here's one of those best practices that I'm going to sprinkle in. If you know you're already going to have a business rule or an email template, it is best practice to do them first. And then when you begin your process definition, you can go from beginning to end. So let me define what these are. So in a workflow, anytime you hear a list of if-then statements, if this condition is true, then output this particular information. For example, let's say your sales team is in North America, so Canada, US, and Mexico. So for whatever states or provinces that may be, one or more state or province may be assigned to a particular user, a sales rep that's going to contact that particular lead, for example, that's come in. So that's over, let's say 70 different, I don't even know how many provinces or states are in Mexico, but that's over like 60 at least, right? Probably closer to 70 different territories that you're going to be dealing with. So you're going to have an if-then statement. So for example, I'm from Texas, so I'm going to use that as an example. If the state is Texas, then assign it to Carol. Okay. So that is an if-then, that's a business rule. Okay. Instead of having 70 branches in my workflow, I can have one little element that's going to handle that one particular feature. And it's going to read that off of the business rule. And yes, they can be reused. You can have one business rule that is going to be in more than one process definition. Now we have several email templates within Sugar, but specifically, if you need to send a email anywhere within a workflow, and there are 3 places that are required to have an email template if you're going to send one, and it has to have an associated email template. You can't even get past that step without an email template, and they are real easy to create. We cover that in class 2. Okay, so now you've got your process done. It is enabled. It's ready to go. It's going to start triggering processes, right? As soon as the criteria for the trigger begins, it will start triggering processes. Those processes may be completely automated, meaning the system does everything, right? From beginning to end, no person is involved, and it may just stop for certain times to elapse. Other processes will stop when a person is required. So say we send a task in a process to Jim. Jim's job is to either click approve or reject, and it waits for him to click those buttons. Okay. So on those things or those particular processes, you as an admin can see as they progress through the steps. And we're going to look at that when we do our demo here in a little bit. Okay. So the final module, so we have process definition. That's module 1. Module 2, business rules, email templates. And the last one is just called processes. Half of it is for users to see the steps in a process that they're assigned to. And the other half is for the admin to see all of the triggered workflows and where they may be in the process. Okay. All right. So this is another one of those best practice moments. Let's talk about steps to creating a process. So we're just going to walk through best practices of building a workflow. And this is compiled from lots of different sources. Like I tried to get the best of the best here to put in about what steps should someone take if they're doing a process or they're thinking about creating a process. So what do? Someone comes to you and they say, hey, I heard you have this workflow system and I have some ideas of how to make sales a little more efficient. And we do a lot of this stuff manually. How can we improve that? Okay, so the first thing you need to understand is they're talking to you is what the business or operational goal is. So this is somehow benefiting your organization or your customers in some way. So a benefit may be something like, or excuse me, a goal is to keep your customers happy, not to upset them, improve productivity, to reduce cost, whatever that particular business or operational goal is, note it. Okay. And yes, there is a place when you're creating this workflow in the record to actually note all of this stuff, right? So you don't have to keep a separate binder or external system. You can put it all in SugarBPM. Okay, next. Sometimes when you're having that conversation with people, one workflow actually is 3, right? As they're talking, we're going to do this, this, and this. Great. So those are actually 3 different workflows, right? Especially if the module that you're going to be triggering or using for that particular workflow is different for different activities, right? One's in accounts, one's in opportunities, one's in contacts. So those are actually 3 different particular workflows. And the naming of that particular workflow will help you, and if you have other admins at your organization, quickly identify what that particular workflow is about. Okay, so the name will help with the scope of that particular process. So as a best practice, we like to use module, verb, noun, syntax for creating our name. It doesn't mean that it just has 3 words in it. It just means that we need to have the name of the module, in this case, quotes, the verb that you're doing, needs approval, or the noun who we're going to do this for, the manager is going to do it. Okay. So yes, you can add other words in there like discount, because that may help. You could even add all discounts over 20% that need manager approval. You could make it as detailed as you need to. Okay. But remember, you're going to have a description field in this workflow that's going to help you define that. Okay. That's FYI, that same description field for all of the out-of-the-box workflows that you get, that by the way are all disabled, you have to enable them. They are going to have detailed information to the admin about how to make that workflow specific to your organization. Okay. So don't just discount that description field. A lot of people look over it and they go, I'm not going to read that. It's a lot of text. It's super helpful, especially if you're going to use a workflow that we've created already out of the box and you just need to tweak it to meet your specific needs. Okay, so now you have your name and your scope, right? So you already know maybe you're going to do 3 different workflows. So start with the first one and start listing out the activities. And what I mean by activities that's required, the inputs and outputs. What is after what's the trigger? Like you're going to have to know that. Like, did a field change? Did a relationship change? Did something change with the user that's associated to the particular record? All that's going to be covered in what we call criteria. Okay. There's also settings in the system. So if you need a particular field to change, so this is an output, change to a certain value, or your output may be to create a whole new record, like a call record or a meeting, or send an email. Those things are also things you need to put in your list. Okay. Then you're going to take that list with the person there or not there. It's up to you. You're going to either draw out, I've seen people use sticky notes on a whiteboard with arrows to each of them so they can move them around as they discuss. It's up to you. Probably the first couple of times you do it, you want to do it on your own. If this is new to you, if it's something that you are very familiar with, sometimes you can do it on the fly, depending on how complex this particular workflow is. Now, this is the magic moment where you know, okay, I'm going to need an email template. I'm also going to need a business rule. You may need more than one email template even, okay? Then you're going to walk through that picture you just drew, and whether that's on some kind of technical drawing tool or on paper and pen. Okay, I just use paper and pen and I just take a picture and send it to whoever I'm talking to. But it's up to you, right? Some people work remote, some people are live in the office, however you want to do it. So you are going to check for clarity, content, and continuity. So does it make sense? Is it understandable? Is it satisfactory? Satisfactory, excuse me. And does the continuity is the unbroken or consistent existence or operation of something over a period of time. So does this particular workflow work with all the scenarios that that user or person, coworker, is thinking in their head it will satisfy? You may get to the conclusion that no, it doesn't. I need like 3 more branches here. I need to add this extra thing here. I totally forgot about this particular scenario that could happen. And your workflow may get bigger, right? So you may need to go back to the name, the list, and then draw it again. Okay. Sometimes, usually, they're just looking at the actual drawing and you can just put in another item in your workflow. Okay. Which is perfectly fine. That happens all the time, right? And sometimes people don't realize all the bits and pieces until you walk through the workflow with them. Okay. All right. So this is a practical application of that. So let's say that you want to send an email notification to customers 2 months before their contract expires. So we have a module, if you don't know this, in Sugar called contracts, and there is a date field on that contract record called expiration date. And so instead of just letting that fall off, like, oh, it's expired, we missed that customer, we want to renew or extend that contract for another year, 2 years, whatever we want to do, right? So some of this is going to make total sense, right? And some of it, let's think about it a little bit. So the goal is we want to continue doing business with the customer. Makes total sense. The name, this is just the way I came up with it. You could call this any way you want. I called it contract expiring alert. Alert, you could have said email. That's fine, right? Email to who? The customer. You can put as many other words in there as you want. Don't write a book, all right? Don't write an extensive thing because you want to be able to quickly identify what that particular workflow is for. So don't get too name happy there with a lot of words, but make sure it makes sense to you and to other admins at your organization. Okay. Then start listing out what you're going to need for this workflow. What's going to be the trigger? Well, you can start with a new contract, right? You need to track 2 months before the contract expiration date. And yes, you can take a date and minus a period of time, very awesome functionality. And also, if you're going to notify this person with an email, you're going to have an email template. Okay. So I'm going to need to wait some time, right? 2 months. That's a particular time period. And I need to know what my trigger is. I need to know how I'm going to end it. Do I do something at the very end, or is it just going to end after it sends the email? Okay. So here's my picture, right? So I'm going to do the validation with you right here. Okay. So we're going to start with a new contract. Then we're going to wait 2 months before the contract expires. So it's going to wait a while, right? Could be months and months, years and years, whatever. Your particular contracts may be short. Maybe they're only a 6-month contract. That's fine. It may not be as long. So it just depends on the time. Now, let me give you a little tip here for best practice. So you just created this. If I were going to test this, I don't want to wait 2 months, right? So I would put something like 2 minutes, 1 minute in, and then see if it triggers. Because all of these workflows you're going to create in the system are going to be in your sandbox. You're not going to go right to your production instance and put these in, right? They need to be tested. So I put them in my sandbox. I put a very short time frame on any wait event, anything that has to say wait blank time, right? Then I can test them very quickly. And then when I put them into production, I will make sure it says 2 months. Okay. That's just another best practice for free. Easy peasy, right? So 2 months, it's hit that date. Then you want an email to be sent to the customer that is based on an email template that the person that has requested this workflow has given you. Okay. And then you're just going to end. The end stops. Okay. There's not lots, there's 3 different types of end events. One of them is just to do nothing. And that's what we would use for this one. Okay. It just stops. That's the end. It doesn't go to a next step in the process. Okay. If the person that has requested it goes, yep, that all looks great, and you put it in the system and you test it or have them test it, and they go, oh, I missed this step. That's okay. We can still go back to the drawing, make sure we understand what they're saying, and then make that correction inside of SugarBPM. Okay. So this is all of that we just created. All of this is step 1 in creating a process, right? So we have walked through the steps to creating the workflow. We know the goal, we know the name, we know the list of activities, inputs and outputs, triggers, how we're going to end it, etc. We know what our picture is going to look like. And then we need to prepare sugar, okay? Now, sometimes when you get to this point, you're drawing out your workflow, you're talking to someone, they're like, okay, so we need to have a territory field. So in sugar, there's no territory field. There's no region field. Now we do have a drop down for countries and a drop down for states in the US, but they could be connected to anything, any fields you want to add in, but we don't have those fields in. Maybe you need a specific team to handle a particular step in the workflow. Or you just need to add a drop-down value that's not there right now. So you're going to have to go into Studio, drop-down editor, layouts in Studio, fields in Studio, wherever it may be, to our teams to add that additional data in. You may even have to create a whole new module builder, right? Especially if you're dealing with like HR, which we don't have any HR particular modules within Sugar out of the box, but you can create one in Module Builder, right? So you may have to do a little more work before you even touch SugarBPM yet, okay? And we have those examples also in our class that we teach. Okay, let's say you've gone through the process, you have added any additional stuff that you need, fields, drop-down values, teams, whatever it may be, layouts, changes in Sugar, and now you're ready to look at your drawing, okay? So if your drawing says anything about email or a business rule, you've got anything, business rule would be anything that's an if then. If this is true, then this, like a big list, then create those next. Create your email template and your business rule. Then you're going to go into process definition and create the process definition record. And this is where in the description, you're going to add all of this stuff in step 1. Who requested is always a good one. When did they request it? What do they want? What's the goal? What's the name? And when I say what they want means, what's the scenario? What's in words? What does that mean? Right? What is their request? Once you have the record done, then we're going to go into what we call the design. Okay, this is where you get to do the fun part, which is take that drawing that you did and put it into SugarBPM in a picture format, okay, in a design. I like to call that you got this grid paper. I love grid paper in the background, and you're just pulling all of these little elements into it, connecting them all together to match your drawing, okay? Then, because we're doing all this, remember, in our sandbox, so when I create step 4, I enable it because I always forget to do that at the end. But this is in your sandbox. You don't have all your regular users in your sandbox, right? They're in your production instance. So you could go ahead and enable it at the beginning because the people that are going to test it, you're not ready to test it, right? You still have to go and put it into the design. Once the design's done and you've saved it and checked for any errors, you're then going to test it, okay, in your sandbox. And I would get folks that are actually going to be getting assigned tasks or that have requested this particular workflow to do the testing for you. Some of them, maybe you have two hats on. You're an admin and you're the sales manager and you're going to be getting these tasks. That's fine. Then you can test it. You trigger it and if there's a wait, make sure you put it at a short amount of time. There is a scheduled event in the background that's going to be triggering every minute. That's what it's set to out of the box. Okay. So if you put 2 minutes on there, you may have to wait 2 minutes. It's not very long to see what that test is. Okay. Now, if everything's great, it all works wonderful, it's exactly the way you wanted it, then you can do what we call export it out and import it into your production instance. That part is super easy. Okay. There's not even any mapping that you have to do with regular exporting and importing of records. Okay. Okay. So let's put one into action. Okay. This is what I'm going to demonstrate. So here's a scenario. When a case stays in the status of assigned for 2 days, a manager needs to review it. So we've assigned this issue that a customer has to a user, a customer support rep. And it's just been sitting there for 2 days and nobody's done anything. He or she has not done anything with it. So we just want a manager to go over there and have a discussion or remind them or whatever they need to do for that particular scenario. And this could be also a lead. Okay, same scenario. I assign this lead to a sales rep and it still has a status of assigned and nothing's happened. Like either one of those are bad, whether it's a case or a lead. 2 days seems like a long time. Depends on the backlog, right? So let's put it into our format, right? So goal, verify the customer requests don't fall through the cracks. We don't want to upset our customer, whatever your goal may be, right? What makes sense to you or makes sense to your coworker that's requesting it. So I'm going to name mine case stagnant in assigned status. I could have also added manager needed, something like that, manager review at the end if I wanted to. I need to know a couple things. So there's 2 places in my workflow where I'm going to need to know the status at the very beginning from the trigger. And then after I wait 2 days, I need to make sure it's not still assigned. What if it triggered, but after 2 days it changed to complete or to in progress or pending input or whatever another status is, right? Then I may need to know that status in more than one location. Totally legitimate. Also, how are you going to notify this particular person? Now, this is me. This is not SugarCRM. This is my preference. I like to do task. Okay. I don't do email because emails can be, oh yeah, I skip it, right? And they don't do it. So I like to create task. I make sure that there is a role that says they can't delete task. And so it's always there. Okay. I'm going to create a task. I'm going to assign it to the manager for them to review this case. That's it. So this is my actual handwriting. I'm very sorry, but this is what it looks like. Okay. So I went too far. So I'm going to walk through it with you. Okay. So here's my trigger. I'm going to start with an existing case that has the status of assigned. So this doesn't need to be a brand new one, but I could put in new and all updates. So it doesn't have to just be a brand new one. I could create a case and assign it at the same time. Okay. So you may need to, when you get to the actual drawing, this is where sometimes you go, wait a minute. So let me ask you these additional questions, right? Do you mean for all existing or do you want it to be for new and existing? Okay, well, new existing, we can change that. So that has a status of assigned. That's the trigger. Okay, that's what's going to trigger our workflow every single time. Okay, then we're going to wait 2 days. Now, hopefully, knock on wood, all of these cases will have changed to something else. But occasionally things are going to fall through the cracks, right? We don't want to go any further than 2 days. So we are going to go, wait a minute, let's make an assessment here. A decision needs to be made. Is the case still assigned? Okay, well, if it's no, meaning it's something else, then that's it. It's done. The workflow is complete. It's over, which is great. Okay, no person had to do anything. But occasionally it's going to be yes, it's still assigned. And these two no and yeses, these are just comments. And I'll talk about comments in a little bit. They don't actually affect anything in the workflow. It's more for like visual understanding. So if someone were to look at this, they go, okay, that makes sense. I know which way's routing which. Okay. So if it is still at assigned, then I'm going to create a task, assign it to the user that is assigned to the case, their manager, their boss, their superior, and tell them in the description what I want them to do. Please contact the assigned user of this case, which will be linked to that task automatically, that says, hey, I need you to do XYZ. Okay. And then once the task is created, it's not going to wait for the manager to do anything. It's just going to send the task. That's it. That's all this workflow does. Okay. And then it ends. And I could have had two ends or one end. So picture could look slightly different. This is what it looks like in Sugar, the same, my drawing or scribble here. This is what it looks like in Sugar. Okay. So it looks a little prettier, obviously. So this one, I actually made the correction, new and existing or updated assigned cases. I'm going to wait 2 days. Now, remember, I'm in my sandbox, so I'm really going to put 2 minutes, something like that. Then I'm going to ask the question, is the status still assigned? I'm going to put 2 comments in, and then it's going to branch. It's either going to go this direction or it's going to go this direction. Okay. So I'm going to take this picture, though actually the picture from above, this one, and I'm going to put it into Sugar, right? So before the person that's going to test it, I need to go to Sugar and put my image in. Okay. So I am going to first create a process definition. And I got to give it a name. So I already came up with my name. I already decided when I wrote out my name and scope, case stagnant in the assign status. Okay. I'm going to make this say cases, super important. It always defaults to the alphabetical module name at the top, which is accounts, unless you have created a new module that's alphabetically higher than that. Cases, okay? Your business rule, your email templates have to have the same target module. Or when you go to that particular step in your workflow, you won't see them because they have a different target module. They're only going to show up for process definitions that have the same target module, okay? Which makes sense. Remember, I'm in my sandbox, so I'm going to go ahead and enable it here. I'm logged in as Jen Smith, and I'm going to leave that order, run order. If I happen to, and I'm having this discussion with my coworker that says, hey, this workflow actually is 2 different workers, I need one trigger for the next one. As long as they have the same target module, you could put one in as run order 1, and the second one is going to run at run order 2, okay? If you needed to. This doesn't happen very often, but if you need to, go ahead. I can also tag it. Those just helps you find, because you're going to have a big list of workflows. Out of the box, there's the big list that you get. But if you want anything else, this is just, how do we want to say this? Case assigned. Okay. And you can create a brand new tag. Then in my description, this is where I'm going to say who requested it, what's the scenario, and what's the goal. I already have the name, so I don't have to type that again. Any list of activities and anything else that you think is relevant. Okay. And then you're going to go up here to where it says save and design. So in the drop down, there's just plain old save, which just saves the record, but you don't get to put your picture in. You don't get to go to the design page. And we want to save this record, and then we want to go to save and design. Okay. So it gives us just like a blank page, a blank grid paper, if you will. And it's ready for me to start pulling in my elements to the page. So just so you're watching me here, if you're in another instance, just watch me, okay? I'm not going to go super slow enough for you to follow step by step. This is being recorded, so you can always refer back to it later, or wink, wink, you can go to the class that I'm going to tell you about later, and you do get to create all these. So I'm going to start with my start event. All of these elements are defined in class, but I'm going to define the ones we're going to be using because we're not going to use every single element. So I'm going to pull in a start event. Automatically, it always highlights the name. So it's ready for you to put your fingers on the keyboard and start typing. So this is going to be new or updated. Oops, cap locks. Case with the status of assigned. Okay, and you can abbreviate as long as it makes sense as much as you want. Now, looky right here. It has, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. It has two little errors on it. Okay, don't freak out. It's just saying you haven't finished it yet. Well, obviously, I just named it, right? I'm not done. So as we go through, those little arrow icons are going to disappear. So don't worry about it till you get to the very end, okay? When you click save. So I'm going to right click on my element and go to save settings. There's only two choices, right? It's delete or settings, so that makes sense. So I'm going to zoom back out again here, just so you can see it, because this is a pretty big box. So already has cases. Notice I can't change it. So I'm going to go to applies to. So this is going to be new or all updates. And by the way, if you hit this little icon to the far right, it will define all of them for you. But they mostly make sense. So I'm going to put in new records and all updates. And then it looks like you can just click in here and start status, right? Equals, and then, put in whatever you want, right? But watch what happens. It doesn't like that. It can't read whatever you're typing, and some people write all kinds of weird stuff. So it needs to be standardized, just like a workflow. So there's a menu at the bottom where it says evaluations right here. And I'm going to click that, and I have two choices. I'm going to evaluate a module field or a user. So I'm actually putting in a field in cases. So I'm going to go to module field evaluation, specifically a field in cases. Okay, so that's the module. Go to this drop down. These are all the fields. Status is equal to assigned. Add. And watch what happens. When I click add, it pops up here to the top. And yes, I could put an and in and put more than one value in if I wanted to. So let's say I want to say assigned or new. I could have both of them in there if I wish. Both have to be true in or sorry, that's not a good example. Let me make this say or. Or is better than and, especially if it's the same drop down value, right? So or. Assigned or new. If it's and, it both have to be true. You could even make it look like a formula with brackets and use not. You can make it as fancy as you want. But for our instance, we're just going to take off this or and gotta hit these just right. There we go. So I'm going to click out. So the menu goes away and I click save. So in a second, one of those little exclamation mark errors or validation issues are going to go away. So I'm going to go to the next step. So this one's a wait. Pretty easy. They tell you what they are at the top here. So I'm going to wait 2 days. Okay. Let me just put in the word wait. And this one's fairly easy. You can do wait 2 days after another date field. So I could get pretty complicated, but this one truly is just 2 and then days. But to test it, I'm going to leave it at 2 minutes. Okay. So I'm just going to have to wait 2 minutes to test it. But if you wanted to say something, date created, sorry, let's pick a field. These are all the date fields and cases. So I could say date created plus, and then put a specific time span, 5 days. Okay. Or you can do it by hours, 24 hours, something like that. And it would look like this. So you can get pretty fancy, but we're going to just use the top one, 2 minutes. Okay. And remember, you're going to have to change that to 2 days later. This is just for testing. Then I'm going to connect these two. Okay. I'm going to put my cursor to the right side of the start event, and I'm going to drag it over to the left side of the wait element. And yes, it takes a little practice to put arrows in, but once you get it, it'll be a lot easier. Okay, so I'm going to put a gateway in. So this means we're going to branch, and I'm just going to call this still assigned, question mark. And notice if I go in right now, it has no settings. So this is another best practice. When you add a gateway, you add the gateway, connect it to the previous event. Then you have to add where it's going to go. Okay. So for this one, we're going to do an end and a action. So this one, this is a completely automated step. So this is going to be create a related record, and I'm going to label it so I can identify what this is. So create task for manager. Okay. So I'm going to connect this one to this, and this, and this. Okay. Now when I go into the gateway, I have settings. Okay. You're not going to have to make a decision until you connect it to all the places it's going to go, right? You may be doing a gateway that has 6, 7, 12 different branches off of it, right? All of them legitimate, all make sense. But you're not going to be able to configure that in the settings until you actually connect them to all 7, 12, however many flows are going to be coming out of it. Okay. So now we're ready to go to settings, and I have 2 choices. Okay. So if it is end, meaning it's done, that means that the it's not at assigned anymore. The status is not assigned, meaning that they went ahead and did the next step. They changed the status to whatever other setting it was. It's not assigned anymore. So that's what we're going to tell the gateway. So we want it to end when the module field status is not equal to assigned. And you could say also not equal to new if you wanted to, okay? And then this one means that it's still at assigned after 2 days. So we want to make this is equal to module, specifically status is equal to still at assigned. They haven't changed it. And then we're going to go route number 2, okay? Now, almost done, almost done. We're going to right click on this one because we haven't configured it. We just labeled it and gave it a action type, which there are lots of different action types. We don't have time to go through all of those, but we do discuss them in the class. So I'm going to go to settings, and I'm going to fill in what I want this task to have. So first of all, I have to tell it it's a task. So here's the task, and it's going to be linked to this case. So I'm going to fill in everything that's required and that I think makes sense. So when they look at it, they know exactly what they're doing. So I'm going to assign this to the supervisor of the record owner. And then in the description, I'm going to say this related case has been assigned to this user with no action. Please contact them and correct this issue. Okay. And yes, you can put dynamic fields in if you want. Okay. If you want to put the actual case name or whatever, you can put that all in the text also, but it will be linked to the specific case already. So I'm going to leave it at a high priority because we don't want our customers to be upset. I want this done as soon as this task is created. As soon as it's created, that's runtime. That means now, okay, basically of when it was run. And then I can say plus, let's say 2 hours. Okay, so I'm going to give them 2 hours to get this done. This is the manager, supervisor. Start date, I'm going to say right now. The task is going to start now, and then the due date is 2 hours from now. Okay. Subject, this is the name. It is required. You have to have a name. It also can have a dynamic field in it also. But I'm just going to say associated case needs your review. Okay. And the team, I can do whatever particular team I want. I'm just going to leave this at global. I can spell global. There we go. Okay. And save. So right now, if I click save and validate, If there's any validation errors, they'll pop up from the bottom and tell me what's missing. Okay. So now I'm going to go test. So I would go into a case, new or updating, and change the status to assigned. So I like to do it this way. Okay. You're in a browser, go to your cases, open it in a new tab. That's just a browser feature. That's not sugar. And test it. So I'm going to just pick an existing one. Here we go. And remember, you're in your sandbox. You're just updating to test particular situation. I could create a new one too if I wanted to. So I'm going to change the status to assigned. And this is an existing update or a all updates. And when I click save, it should trigger. Okay. So if I go to processes, specifically process management, that's an admin feature. I can see a couple of things. I can see the case that I created, the particular workflow that it triggered on. And then if I click this little eyeball icon, I can actually see where it is in the workflow. So it's waiting. Okay. I have a couple that have triggered already because I created this workflow earlier. And that's why it's doubling everything. And they have completed, which means if I look at the icon, the eyeball icon, I can, let me make this bigger. I can see that this one, everything color completed. So in this particular case, they, within the 2 days, they changed the status to something besides assigned and it just ended. But on these other ones, they didn't. So it went this direction. Oops, sorry. Went this direction. Yes, it's still assigned and it created a task. And let me show you what that looks like. So if I go to the actual record, this one, and I scroll down to task, this is from the other option, but this is the case that it's triggered from, that the system is linking it to, the name at the top. If there's anything like description, things they need to do, all of that's within the process. Okay. So it will show you from beginning to end what it does. One other thing while I'm in here, I want to show you real quick. So for those of you that may be enterprise customers, your scheduler for this is called, you just need to make sure it is active. For those of you on the cloud with us, we do this for you, so you don't have to worry about it. But I want to show you SugarBPM scheduled jobs. They're running every minute. Okay, so as often as possible, and you can see here, this is my time zone, so that's why the date and times look like this. But every minute, checking to see if there's any wait events or if something needs to be triggered, it's triggering it. Okay, so if you don't have a status of active here, for those of you that are enterprise, or if you're a partner working with an enterprise customer, make sure you're active or it's not going to check every minute. That's as often as possible. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? I'm checking chat here real quick. Okay, I think I've covered some of the questions that are in there. Okay, so let me go to wrapping it up. All right. Now, I know we only did one process, but there's quite a few best practices that we discussed, or I'm going to add to this list. So first of all, if you have a business rule or an email template, create those before you create your process definition so you can just go beginning to end. So instead of doing a task in my last workflow, I could have done an email, but I needed to do the email template first, and then I could have just gone from beginning to end in my process and not had to step out and go, oh, let's go create an email, and then I got to come back in. I like to do it from beginning to end. And that's not my best practice. That's actually in documentation. Create and test all processes in your sandbox first. Okay. Now, if you haven't implemented Sugar yet and you're setting up your production instance, that's okay. You could still put them in production as long as you haven't implemented or gone live and not a bunch of users are in there, right? So otherwise, after you've already implemented, put everything in your sandbox to test it. Always review the settings when you do an undo redo. So let's say I delete something off, like a whole element with the arrows and everything, and then I undo it. Always go back into that element and verify, yes, the settings, all the settings I had in there are still in there. Okay. Now, this is an old best practice, I think. I've done undo and redo many times since this first came out, and it seems to not have that issue anymore. But I still check, mainly because it's just ingrained in me to just verify. I do that in Word too. I mean, anytime I undo or redo something. Okay, process definition can have multiple start events. Okay, they just have to be mutually exclusive, meaning it needs to know I go route 1 or route 2. It can't do both routes at the same time. So they have to have different applies to with the same criteria. Different applies to. So one of them says new record, the other start event says all updates or first update, whatever, right? As long as they're different. So it just needs to know which route to go. Next, when adding gateway, and we talked about this one when we did ours, drag your gateway on, add the 2 or more elements or flows that are going to flow out of it, connect them, and then you can configure the gateway settings. Otherwise, you won't have even settings available because it's not connected to anything to route. Okay. Assign, when you do a action element that's assign a user, okay, make sure that you're following that with a, sorry, assign your user action must be followed by an activity. An activity is when you actually assign someone to do something, okay, a user or a group of users to round robin or that they can claim. Use comments, okay? I didn't do it in my demo, but it was in the example and in the previous workflow that I did to define particular branches that you're doing, but also if you got lots of steps within your workflow, it's nice to say, you know, this particular area is doing this step and this area of the workflow is doing this step. I mean, don't use it just to clutter up the page, but make sure it makes sense. So if anybody looks at it, they go, yep, I know exactly what you're doing in this particular step. Okay. So I have a question in chat about moving processes. So the question is about, I have a lot of processes that I've created. How do I move them all to a dev instance? So the out of the box way to do that is to export and import, but you have to do that one at a time. If you want to move more than one and you're on sell or serve, I would contact support to help you with that. They can move things or help you with moving things from production to back to a dev instance or sandbox instance. Okay. And they're just email them support@sugarcrm.com. Or if you're working with a partner, make sure you contact them and they can help you with that. Okay. Otherwise, it's a one off. If you do it through the UI, it's export one, import that one, export one, import. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to add these links into chat for everybody. So just open them and bookmark them. You may need them later. So they're in the admin guide and in the application guide actually too. Admin guide goes through creating SugarBPM. If you're good at just reading text and then testing it or applying that yourself, that may be the way to learn. If you want help articles to step-by-step instructions of how to create a particular scenario, that's in the help articles. If you want an answer on a specific topic within SugarBPM, you can go to Sugar Club, go to the search feature, and let's say you want to know, I want to know SugarBPM date variables. Just type that in and it will give you information about that specific topic. Okay. The last resource that I'm going to give you is also the class. The next class that we do, we just had it last week for June, but in August, we have the Introduction to SugarBPM class. You can register here. It goes to Sugar Club and then takes you into SugarU to register for the class. There is a cost involved with it. If you are a employee, you don't have to pay for it, but everybody else, there's a cost for it. And that's how you can register for it. August 13th and 14th, it's 3 hours a day. Okay. And you do have hands-on. You will be creating workflows, business rules, email templates, managing processes. You'll be doing all 4 of the modules and you'll get to learn how to do everything within it. Okay. All right. It doesn't look like I have any more questions about anything, but if you also, um, someone said they didn't get the link. So let me go back up to the registration here. Okay. You can just use your phone if you want and just to capture it real quick, or you can just go into Sugar Club and type Introduction to Sugar BPM class. In the future, there will be also an intermediate class. I'm working on that right now, which is more scenario based. Okay, lots of different features within it that goes it goes beyond the introduction class, right? Okay, don't have any more questions. So I'm just going to give you a little bit more information here. Just take a screenshot. So let's say you have a question afterwards. You can always go to Sugar Club or Sugar University and do a search, find answers, but you can always email university@sugarcrm.com about this webinar, this topic, or anything else that you don't know about. And we will get an answer to you. Even if we have to send you to a particular sales rep to uh, that we have in the organization or to customer support, or here's the link to the documentation, or here's a help article, here's the training video we do. We will help you find information that you need or getting more information about a topic. Also on X, or formerly known Twitter, we do have a SugarCRM where we post classes, discounts to classes that we may have, upcoming webinars or things that are coming up that you may be interested in. Okay. Sorry, I'm 2 minutes over. But I just wanted to offer, once again, if you do have any more questions, always email university@sugarcrm.com. And thank you so much for attending today's webinar. We will be putting the recording out on Sugar Club as soon as it's ready. Okay. You have a good rest of your day wherever you may be in the world. And thanks again for listening. Bye-bye.